Give me just a sec. It takes a few minutes to...
I didn't even know you could put a Zoom thing on Facebook, but I've just watched them through your page.
Yeah, you can do it through YouTube too, but the problem with that is I can't figure out how to do it through Facebook and YouTube, through Zoom. I think with social media these days, every time I feel like I have something figured out, they change it, and then I don't have it figured out. Share to newsfeed. Let's see. Takes a minute to load.
Okay.
All right, and I think we're live.
Hi, Carrie.
Hey, give me just a second. Let me get all organized here.
Very good.
Okay, let me check and make sure that everything's working properly. Yep, it looks like we are. Oh, yeah, hey, Benjamin's here. Hey, Benjamin.
Oh, hey, Benjamin. Guten Tag.
Yes, guten Tag.
We've been learning German during the pandemic, and I'm hoping to visit Benjamin at some point.
Oh, that'd be so cool. I told him, I said, how fun would it be if we did a Hollywood Kitchen live from Germany together and made Marlene Dietrich's food in Germany?
Yeah. Cool. Go to the Marlene Museum.
That is on my bucket list.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. Today is a special Christmas cookie episode, and I have as my guest Danny Miller. He is a film history expert. He is a co-author of a book about makeup artist Dottie Panadel. And he also is an expert on Virginia Weidler, which is going to be our celebrity topic of today. We're going to make Virginia Weidler's cookies. So Danny, welcome to Hollywood Kitchen.
Thank you. I love your show, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you.
I've been making some of the, I think I tried Maryland stuffing, the baked apple, but I was terrified of Norma Shearer's oatmeal sticks. I haven't gone that route yet.
You were right to be terrified. You were correct in feeling that. So tell us how you first discovered Virginia Weidler's work.
You know, like many people, I initially saw her in The Philadelphia Story, which is, I would say, my favorite classic movie of all time. I mean, I can't even count the number of times I've seen it. I've seen it twice at the TCM Festival, many other times on the screen. I just think it's great. And she, as you know, stands out so strongly in that film. And that was my gateway. And then, of course, I loved her in The Women as Norma Shearer's daughter, Little Mary. And then I started getting involved in all of her films that she made before and after that. And I got involved with this Facebook group called, believe it or not, the Virginia Weidler Remembrance Society, run by this guy named Pete White in Baltimore, who I've now known for years but have never met, who just knew everything. And then we just started researching her. She had this very successful career that is, most of those films are just not that well known today at Paramount. In the mid 30s, when every studio was desperately looking for a replacement for Shirley Temple. We can get more into that later, but it started with The Philadelphia Story. I just loved her so much in that. I collected everything I could. I have all these great pictures of her with Katharine Hepburn. Last year, my wife made a Christmas ornament of this picture that we have, even though we're Jewish. And I just think her scene, she's great throughout the film, but her scene with Jimmy Stewart and Ruth Hussey when she then goes on to play Lydia the Tattooed Lady. I probably watched that 200 times. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me what she pulls off in that scene. So that was my gateway. And then I learned so much more about her young life, her older life, how she left movies after 1943, but still did a lot of interesting things. I've met her grandchildren. We helped to declare on her 90th birthday, which would have been her 90th birthday. Sadly, she died quite young at 41. Virginia Weidler Day. I'll just show you that. The city council proclaimed that. We had her council person from Eagle Rock, where she was born, go through the city council. And here is me presenting Virginia Weidler's granddaughter, Lindsay Chriselle Rock, with the certificate from the city council, which was very exciting. And we had a hand in getting TCM to do a starring Virginia Weidler night several years ago, where Ben Mankiewicz introduced 5 of her films. So I just love getting the word out there that Philadelphia Story is the greatest, and so is The Women, but there's a lot more.
Excellent. So what is your favorite Virginia Weidler film?
I mean, other than The Philadelphia Story, because I have to, and The Women, I mean, those are just up on top. But there's some amazing ones. Her initial one that really, she did small roles in a couple of films, and one of the things that was interesting is even at the age of 7, she was completely trilingual in both German, French, and English. And that's how she got her first role, playing Constance Bennett's niece in, what was that called? After Tonight, because they needed a little girl in some scene at the port or something who spoke German. So she did that. But anyway, and I was gonna say, and because of her trilingualism, that wonderful scene in The Philadelphia Story when she starts talking French with Katharine Hepburn, who also spoke French. Love it, love it. So her languages got her started. I love a film called Bad Little Angel, where she co-stars with Jean Reynolds. It's what would today probably be called like a spiritual, almost religious film, believe it or not, at MGM. But actually, yeah, I think it was MGM. And it's just a beautiful film. And sadly, so many of these are hard to find, but TCM does show them every once in a while. There's a great movie called The Underpup. Have you heard of that one? It's a Gloria Jean movie. I think she just died last year. And actually, they loaned her to Universal for that. And she's often playing like the kind of precocious, sometimes mean girl, sometimes just really precocious, smart girl. There's a great movie called The Great Man Votes, directed by Garson Kanin, where she co-starred with John Barrymore. And John Barrymore became such a huge fan, he called her Hollywood's greatest actress when she was a little girl. And I love the story when he was visiting the year after he made that movie with Virginia, he was visiting the set of The Philadelphia Story. Obviously, he knew Katharine Hepburn very well too. And he was talking to Katharine Hepburn after watching a scene of one of the family scenes. And he said, I mean, that was just thrilling, watching some of the greatest acting I've ever seen. And Katharine Hepburn said, oh, thank you, John. He's, no, I was talking about Virginia Weidler. So he was her biggest fan. I was starting to say, her first movie was Mrs. Wiggs of the Cabbage Patch. Do you know that one?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, it's wonderful. She played Europina Wiggs. This is where she was really discovered. After that, Paramount signed her for a 7-year contract. And she was famous in the film for holding her breath till she turned blue. And W.C. Field was in that film, Zazu Pitts. Her mother was played by Pauline Lord. So, you know, she made 40 films. Of course, she was in Babes on Broadway with Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, and she was great in that. That's when she was like at the height of her MGM fame after moving over from Paramount. And I love her last 2 films too. The Youngest Profession, where she's an autograph hound, and you have all these cameos from MGM stars like Greer Garson and Walter Pidgeon, and she's like with her friend, she sneaks into Greer Garson's hotel room, and Lana Turner's in it. It's really a fun movie. That's been on TCM. And then her final film, Best Foot Forward, which was brought over from Broadway, although they, as they often do, change the plot quite a bit. But so Lucille Ball plays a movie star coming to this military school as a special treat. And of course, all the boys go nuts for Lucille Ball, and Tommy Dix, who was in the Broadway play, plays Virginia's boyfriend, who kind of spurns her for Lucy. Actually, he's in it. And that's the movie that brought the trio of June Allison, Gloria DeHaven, and Nancy Walker to MGM, right from the Broadway play. And they sing that great song, The 3Ds, that's in That's Entertainment. That's one of my favorites too. So she had really a nice career.
Excellent. So, let's talk about the cookie recipe. So you originally found a Virginia Weidler cookie recipe in photoplay. You made it, and things went wrong. So
I found this recipe for molasses ginger cookies. I made them last week. I even have a picture of them, so you can see I really made them. They look good. They were very strong. You know, some of these recipes from the 40s, first of all, it was wartime, so they were using, you know, sometimes to us strange ingredients. And there was a whole cup of molasses. And I mean, I love a nice ginger snap, but it's not my favorite. And tons of ginger. And these cookies were so strong. I mean, you can't even believe it. And I thought, I don't want to make 2 more batches of that next week. So I found this. I have pictures of Virginia with other cookies, including ones that look very much like this retro chocolate crinkle cookie that we decided to make in her honor. That's also a very retro, no butter, wartime rations kind of cookie that is just delicious. My mother actually used to make these when I was little, and until I made this batch, I hadn't had them since then. So that was very nostalgic. And I think they're delicious. They've been a big hit around my house so far.
I had some for breakfast, so
Good. Very easy to make, as I'm sure you know, except it does, from when you make the batter, you have to then chill it for several hours before you cook them. But they're very Christmassy because you roll them in powdered sugar before you bake them, so they look like, you know, little snowball-y things. So should we make some?
We should make some, yes.
Okay.
So by the way, I will be posting this recipe on the new HollywoodKitchenShow.com blog after the episode. So if anyone wants to make these on your own, you can. And I've kind of laid out all the ingredients on the table here.
I've got them all here since I'm in my dining room, not my kitchen.
So what we need, half a cup of vegetable oil, 4 ounces of unsweetened baking chocolate melted and cooled, which is cooling off right now.
Here's my oil.
2 cups of granulated sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, 4 eggs, 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, a half teaspoon of salt, and 3/4 cup of powdered sugar. So I've got all the pieces here.
Yeah, the powdered sugar comes after. You don't put that in the dough.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay.
And it's important to when you melt your unsweetened chocolate, it's important to let it cool. Otherwise, your eggs are probably going to cook a little bit.
Are you putting the chocolate in first, Annie?
I put the oil in first, and now I'm adding the chocolate.
Okay, then that's what I'll do too. All right, I'm gonna put my
That's an easy recipe. I mean, it's like you just throw everything together. You know, sometimes you have to cream the butter a certain way and cook and beat things. But this one, honestly, I mean, yeah, there's an order that I use, but you can just throw it together anyway. I'm gonna add my copious amounts of white sugar, 2 cups. Although, if you've ever cooked with unsweetened sugar, my son was all excited because, oh, it smells so good. And then he tasted it. It's horrible. You have to add a lot of sugar. But this is the super easy, you know, one dish thing. You don't even need a mixer.
Hang on, my chocolate's sticking to the pan a little bit here. So hang on just a second, let me.
And Virginia did do, if the magazines are any indication, although her granddaughter, who sadly didn't know her because Virginia died in 1968, but her father told her that she cooked all the time. And and you see in the magazine, she's always throwing parties for all the child stars of the time. She was really close friends with Jane Withers, who I spoke to on the TCM red carpet once. And the minute I brought up Virginia Weidler's name, she started crying. She just loved her so much.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, everyone I've talked to. I also ran into Jean Reynolds, you know, who went on to produce MASH and do all the TV things, who starred with her in Bad Little Angel. And he was moved to tears as well. She was beloved.
Oh.
I'm adding my 4 eggs.
Okay, so, all right, I got the chocolate and the oil. All right, granulated sugar and vanilla. Okay, so I got the granulated sugar. Everything is sticking here today. Hang on a sec.
These are a really good addition if you're making Christmas cookies to the box because they're so pretty. I'm going to add my vanilla.
Okay, vanilla. Stir in eggs one at a time.
Yeah.
Do you stir them in one at a time, or you just pour all of them in at once?
Honestly, right now I just cracked them all in and now I'm just stirring them up.
Okay.
I think don't they say that in case there's like, one of them's bad or something?
Yeah, you know what I always do? My mom always told me to crack the eggs over a test bowl and fish out any of the shells, so that way when you're ready to cook, you don't have to worry about.
Well, and in the old days, and my father used to actually have a job of checking when he was a little kid, of checking for fertilized eggs. He'd hold them over a candle or something. I forgot how it worked, but I remember even in my childhood, you sometimes get specks of blood and stuff. So I think that's why I've never seen that lately, I must admit. And then
Stir in flour, baking powder, and salt.
Yeah, and I've mixed mine together. You don't have to sift it or anything. It's just that you could literally make this dough in 5 minutes. We bake a lot in my house. And
salt. Okay, and how much? 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Okay.
Yeah, which is kind of a lot.
Teaspoons of baking powder.
Have you tried to make any, because this recipe of the molasses ginger, there were steps missing, there were ingredients mentioned that weren't, I kind of had to wing it, and maybe that's why it was so strong and weird. Have you had success making recipes straight out of the fan magazines?
Yes and no. When Annette and I did the Janet Gaynor pumpkin pie, as you know from the other night, every time I do one of these episodes, what I always do is I do an hour or so on Zoom with my guest way before we record it, just to say, okay, let's make this recipe, let's test it, let's talk about it. If it doesn't work, what can we do to make it work, etc.
Right.
And Annette and I, we made the pumpkin pie, and we both sat back and we're like, this is good. We really don't need to do anything, which was kind of surprising because, like, for example, the Norma Shearer oatmeal stick, that was kind of comical because when we made it, we were like, it's a lump of dough with no flavor whatsoever. Like if I crumpled a Post-it note and ate it, it would be the same exact
thing. Oh my
thing.
God. Not a reflection on Norma's role in our lives, or Virginia's for that matter. I love their scenes in The Women. And I was telling you the other day how it makes me crazy sometimes in public screenings when people start laughing or even sometimes horrible people hissing at Virginia Weidler just because she's the only child in the film and some of her initial scenes are, a little schmaltzy, but her scene in the bathroom with Joan Crawford, I would stack up. I mean, she holds her own with Joan Crawford, and Joan Crawford knew it and appreciated it.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I saw Virginia on film was when I was in high school. I saw The Women, and the thing is, like, Joan had been acting longer than Virginia had even been alive at that point, but she thoroughly holds her own against Crawford, against Shearer.
Totally.
I mean, these are formidable women, and Virginia completely pulls it off working with them, and she's terrific. And that definitely stood out to me even back then,
She had such a natural quality, and when she was on one of her first films at Paramount, her mother said, because she had no, obviously, acting training whatsoever, although we can talk about later, all her brothers and sisters were also in the movies. She had 5. But the mother suggested to, I think, Norman Taurog, the director, that she was going to get an acting coach. And he said, I absolutely forbid it. You cannot find this kind of natural acting anywhere. So don't do that.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll probably agree that a lot of the child stars, some of them could be very cloying and cutesy, and kind of have a bag of tricks, if you will. Virginia didn't have that. Yeah, she had this naturalistic quality that seemed effortless, and it didn't seem trained. And I agree with Norma Turek, that was the best possible thing for it to not seem trained.
Yeah.
Because some of those child stars are so trained, they almost come across like performing seals or something. You know what I mean? They're just so...
Or in today's age, because I'm also a part-time movie journalist, and I've interviewed many directors who work with kids, and they always fear what they call, perhaps unfairly, but the Disney kids, the ones who went through like those shows and had, it's very much I'm acting now. And Virginia didn't have that at all. Another contemporary of hers who she knew that we both know now and is doing very well is Cora Sue Collins, who I think has that same kind of quality.
Oh, Cora Sue is lovely. Yeah, she's really great.
Were you at the Cinematheque a couple of years ago when they showed, and she had never seen it, her very first movie when she was, I think, 3, maybe 4?
Yes, I was there. I've been to several screenings of her films.
I mean, that was fantastic acting, and her accolades, she got showed it, as did Virginia's from the very beginning, and that's why Paramount grabbed her, oh my God, what do we have here?
I think my dough's pretty much ready.
Yep, mine too. And I'm going to show you I'll show you through the magic of television so then you put it in the refrigerator for at least 3 hours, I would say, and then it becomes like this nice, much stiffer dough. You have some of the cold dough already, or because I was
I did what you suggested. I saved a bunch of the cold dough.
Okay.
So I have it right here, and we can show people how we scoop it out and make the cookies.
Yeah, so you want to either grease a pan, or I like using parchment paper. I see you do too.
Yeah, I like the parchment paper because it doesn't, it makes it really easy to work with.
And then you just want to take a teaspoon size of the dough. The original recipe says, drop it into the sugar, but I get a little messy and form it into a ball first.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
It's just easier because you want to have these just perfect little balls that you roll in powdered sugar, as I'm doing now. And that makes the crinkle of the chocolate crinkle when it bakes, spreads out. And you want to have them they are going to spread, so 2 inches apart from each other.
Yeah. We can always talk about Virginia kind of while we're doing this too. So
yeah. Well, one thing, so I mentioned that she played Constance Bennett's niece in, what was that called again? I always forget the name of that. After Tonight, I think. And Francis Lederer, remember him?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's Austrian. He was putting on a play at what is now the El Capitan Theater that we love, but was then, for a while, it was a legitimate play theater. And he needed a little girl who spoke German because the play took place in Austria and there were scenes where she had to speak German. And he saw her in that and he hired her. And that was her first big, stage gig. She did a Broadway play actually years later. But, and that was a huge success. And it was all this, wonderful series of kind of accidental events. That's when Paramount saw her and brought her in to play Europina Wiggs and Mrs. Wiggs and the Cabbage Patch. And that set off her career. She signed her contract. I have all these cute pictures from the paper at the LA City Courthouse at the same day, in the same moment with Baby Leroy, or you call him Leroy.
I love him.
Who was a big Paramount star. Her period at Paramount, although I would venture to say that she was at the top of the heap, but it was there was a plethora of great child stars, some of whom are barely remembered today, sadly, but there was a kid, David Holt, who was one of my favorites. There was a kid named Billy Lee, who was a little bit more in the Disney school, if you forgive me. Lois Kent, all these kids that were part of that scene. Again, Paramount and every studio desperately trying to find the next Shirley Temple, which I'm sure they all hated because every article was, here's the next Shirley Temple, here's the next Shirley Temple, boy or girl. It was why can't they just be themselves, as Virginia certainly was, and very different from Shirley Temple. She knew Shirley Temple, but as you probably know, and as Cora Sue has told us too, Mrs. Temple wasn't that into letting Shirley have friendships with other Hollywood kids. So, because they liked her a lot and they wanted to play with her and they would sometimes go do public things for the fan magazines, but they never really got to become good friends with her, sadly. Although Shirley Temple had an amazing, great life, as you know, and maybe her mother protected her and allowed her to have that good life.
Yeah, I noticed in old Hollywood, it seems like they were constantly, which I guess they still do today, if something works, do it over and over and over and over again.
Right.
And also the sense of they were always trying to, like, even at the same studio, of course, trying to give someone else a run for their money. Like Peggy Shannon at Paramount's the next Clara Bow. Like,
Right.
it's almost like they were trying to threaten these stars by saying, hey, if you ask for more money or get out of line, I got someone waiting in the wings to take your place.
Totally. And in the case of child stars, because Gloria Jean, when she made the Underpup, when Virginia was in that with her, she was the next Deanna Durbin. She was a great singer, but it was just when Deanna Durbin was leaving and moving on to different kinds of roles. So we need another one, which is not really fair to them. And Virginia herself grew to hate her moniker of, they always had her in braids or pigtails. And, after a point, she wanted to move on and she tried. But so she was called the pigtailed brat sometimes. And did love. There was a point where I don't think you could have gotten her to put her hair in braids if you begged her to, but for many movies, that was her look. I've got mine. I'm going to put that in the oven later, but I already have some cooked. Not saying it's not a little messy when you're doing it this way.
This is true. This is true. My hands are very messy right now.
That Photoplay article also had a chocolate cake of hers that I almost made, but I thought, oh, cookies. Cookies is for Christmas. Here's a wonderful.
I noticed in my vintage Hollywood celebrity cookbooks, there's a lot of chocolate cake recipes. So there's
and the ones from the war often did have, different ingredients. I mean, I cook with a lot of butter. I don't know about you, so I'm always shocked when it's not in there.
This is true.
Here's a wonderful picture of Virginia with Mary Haynes, little Mary Haynes. I love them in that film.
Oh, yeah. So you said Virginia. Let's talk about Virginia's early life. So she was the youngest, of 5, 6 kids?
There were 6 kids. Here's a picture of them. This is when Virginia was really young. 3 girls and 3 boys. The first 4 kids were born in Germany. They all had German names that they changed when they moved to LA in the mid-20s. And the final 2 were George Weidler and Virginia. Now, some people may know that George Weibler, if you look him up, he was a great musician. He played on so many of the great bands, and the 3 brothers had a band up through, I think, maybe even the 70s and 80s called the Weibler Brothers. But his biggest claim to fame in terms of renown was he was married to Doris Day. It was her, I think, second husband. And by all accounts, they really loved each other, but they were very young, and he was on the road constantly. And sometimes she was appearing as a band singer with him. This is before she was super famous. It was more like she was a band singer. But that's always interesting that Virginia was Doris Day's sister-in-law for a couple years. But they were, according to Ginny, and all her family and friends called her Ginny, according to her granddaughter, Lindsay, because she unfortunately didn't know Virginia, but she knew the brothers, and they were just a delightfully eccentric, kind of crazy family. When we were talking about baking these cookies, and she said, oh, my 3 uncles loved anything that was burned. So whenever they were making cookies at home and they accidentally burned a batch, they would save them for when the Weibler brothers came over, which I thought was very funny. But they were all in the movies. I mean, her brothers preceded her. They were in the Shirley Temple movie Dimples. As their little, they went on to be have an adult band called the Weibler Brothers, but they were also little kids. They were all very musical in that family. She herself, too, could, I think, play the cello and possibly the piano. And so they were in Dimples. I've seen that scene with them, which is quite good, and some Little Rascal movies. And then the sisters were like extras in some films, and they had made some like dancing roles, but it was really Virginia that, became the huge star of the family at a very young age, and was, I think, providing a lot of the income too. Her mother had been an opera singer in Germany, at least according to the press releases, but I believe that is true. And her father, Alfred, was an architect, and when he first came, they first emigrated here. He did miniatures for the studios. I guess they would do their sets to like plan, or maybe miniatures that were used in the film. But always a dramatic family. They always had these beautiful houses with lots of grounds where they would put on plays. They had tons of animals. Virginia loved animals. She had 2 Great Danes. I think some of her dogs appeared with her in films, although in Bad Little Angel, besides Jean Reynolds, her co-star was none other than Toto, the original Terry, the Cairn Terrier. And like Judy Garland, she so fell in love with him that she wanted, do you remember the stories that Judy Garland wanted to adopt Toto, and obviously his trainer was like, no. Toto was in The Women too, as you may know, at the very beginning. But he has a nice big role in Bad Little Angel.
And he has a cenotaph at Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
Oh, that's right. And I remember I read his book, I, Toto, which is a lot of fun. Here's Virginia with her mother. I just happened to have this one, was when she was more like a preteen on the lot. Her mother was her like manager. The father wasn't around as much, but the mother really took care of her career. And there's this story that followed her in every single press account. I'm not sure it's true, but it's written in every article from the 30s that when she was 2, she was cast in some version of Moby Dick that with John Barrymore did that ever get made? Because apparently in this film there was like this modern segment, and in that segment they needed a little girl, and there was some weird scene, I mean nothing that weird, but like where she had to like lift her dress because, I don't know, show her underwear or something in the scene, and she refused to do it at 2 years old. And the director was like, oh no, you got to do that. And the mother was like, she doesn't want to do it, we're out of here. And so I admire. But they mentioned that. I mean, some of these stories, as you know, become like legendary things that follow the stars. I'd be curious to know what exactly happened there. But anyway, that was the first time John Barrymore met her. Then she had a very small role in one of his films and co-starred with him in The Great Man Votes, where he declared her Hollywood's greatest actress. So he was a big fan. I mean, the big stars really loved her, because can you imagine how horrible it was to work with kids that, weren't any good? So they really appreciated that.
Definitely. Now, how did, so let's talk about, so when she was a child star, that it's always very difficult for child stars to kind of transition to being teen and then being adult. And those are such difficult transitions to make. How did Virginia tackle that problem?
I mean, I would say her heyday was, well, she had this amazing, like above the title Paramount career, films like Girl of the Ozarks. She did this amazing George Stevens movie that was considered lost, but there was like one, it was called Laddie, and they remade it in 1940 with the girl who played Agnes, Joan Carroll, who just recently died, in the role. And as a film historian, I'm sure you will be horrified to know that one of the things that happened, because the original was made in 1935 and they remade it in 1940, and thinking that they needed that to be the definitive version, they like destroyed almost every copy of the Virginia Weidler, directed by George Stevens, one of his early films that was fantastic.
That's like a stake in my heart hearing stories.
Yeah, but there was one, the Academy had one print, and about 4 years ago, maybe, they had that George Stevens lecture at the, I always assumed, being a Virginia Weidler researcher, that it was lost, but there was one, and they restored it. It still has never appeared other than this one screening at the Academy, and with a whole lecture, and they talked about it, and it was fantastic film. But anyway, so she had all those films. Then she moved to MGM in her first of 3 films with Mickey Rooney. That's a wonderful movie called Love is a Headache. And they had a fantastic rapport. He loved her. And so getting back to your question, I would say that by Philadelphia Story, that was her peak. And then, how many films did she even make after that? They tried to pair her with Ray McDonald in a movie called Born to Sing. That was going to be her first young adult role. It didn't really work. And then she made those 2 films that I really do love, called The Youngest Profession and Best Foot Forward. And it wasn't like, okay, she wasn't let go. She was still under MGM contract for several more years. And it's kind of a mystery as to what happened to her movie career, because she started doing live appearances as a singer. And she would be one of the people, like she appeared at the Chicago Theater in my hometown. I have the great reviews of her. She used to imitate, remember the great deadpan singer Virginia O'Brien? She would do her, she would sing songs in the style of other people, she would play instruments, and she was a big hit. But it was always like, and then about to come back and do this other movie, and about to come back and do this other movie, and it never happened. She never made another film. She auditioned, speaking of her great scene in the bathroom with Joan Crawford, believe it or not, I found out for Vita in Mildred Pierce, which was already several years after, when was that? Do you remember when Mildred Pierce was?
45?
Yeah, so it was a couple years after she had appeared on the screen. And yeah, I think it would have been great. Anne Blythe was great. I actually mentioned it to her and she said, oh, everyone in town was auditioning for that. She couldn't believe that she got it, but it never happened. I almost wonder if maybe there was even some, it would be weird to have, Mary Haynes as her daughter. Who knows? But she never made another film. There were several almosts. So, I think part of that was she wasn't the braided kid anymore and they didn't know what to do with her. She's a lovely young adult in Babes on Broadway. I love this movie. There she is with Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney and that whole gang. She sings and dances. I wish she had gone on more, but then, of course, she ended up at a quite young age, I think maybe 19 or 20, she got married, and it was a wonderful marriage to a young guy. I think he had just come out of the army, Lionel Crizel, and basically, lived happily ever after, had 2 sons. She had a really good life until she sadly died quite young, but, I don't think she looked back and bemoaned her movie career. She did a couple plays. She did a Broadway play that when she was still under contract with MGM called Junior Miss that she was very good in, but never made another film. So, we look at people like Elizabeth Taylor and so many others who beautifully transitioned from child to adult roles. And I think she probably, she certainly had the talent to. It just didn't happen. The circumstances didn't happen. And I think she was, a little fed up with that and got married and did other things. She had a TV show for a little while in San Diego, like a local TV show where I think she sang. Never found any copies of that. But she got very involved in her children's school and by all accounts, and was still beloved. I mean, Jane Withers knew her. She stayed close to her friends. She lived in Cuba for a while with her husband who was working there. And the one, there's no pictures of her as an adult. And Lindsay, her granddaughter, gave me this one picture that I so treasure, if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. Because they knew Ernest Hemingway really well. So here's grown-up Ginny, right here, next to Ernest Hemingway, which I think is very exciting. And she also told me that while she was in Cuba, the Duke of Windsor, the former king, used to come visit Hemingway, and he always sought out Ginny as his dance partner, because apparently she was, well, we know she was a great dancer from her Busby Berkeley days and otherwise. So, just a remarkable person. Everyone I've met I've talked to many people that knew her, they all loved her. I would love for people to discover some of these other films that she made because they were so good. And if you can find them, watch them.
Absolutely. Is there any way we could see some of the posters in the background? Because you mentioned to me.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of them, I just threw them there mostly because there's light there, but that's out. She's in Out West with the Hardys. That was my other gateway because my mother loved the Andy Hardy movies. And so I watched all of them. I know they're a little schmaltzy, but man, I love them. She's not in the poster. I have some lobby cards that she's in. And that one is another Andy Hardy poster, the one that introduced Esther Williams. I think it's beautiful art. Back in the day when it was so, easy to find these things and I had more disposable income, I amassed quite a collection, a lot of Andy Hardy posters that I had restored by this amazing Russian guy who used to work for the studios named Igor. And I have these two. I was looking through my movie stuff. I honestly, until the other day, didn't realize I had not one, but two signed by her pictures of Virginia Weidler. This one, when she was at the height of her Paramount fame, the braided brat. And then this is how she looked when they were trying to, present her as more of the young adult.
Oh, she's so beautiful as an adult.
Yeah, very pretty. And she signed it. It was to someone named Germaine. Best wishes, sincerely, Virginia Weidler. By the way, I grew up calling her Virginia Weidler. And then I found, when I started talking to people that knew her, like, no, it's Weidler. And I found a press release, because apparently I wasn't the only one who mangled her name, from MGM saying, it's pronounced Weidler, W-H-Y-Ler. So I actually found her original personnel file from MGM. You can see, this is a copy of it, obviously, with the MGM logo. When she was a little girl, she was 52 inches, 60 pounds. They just asked really interesting questions. All her family is in there. Favorite exercise, baseball, swimming, animals, 2 Great Danes, musical instruments played, studies cello. How did you get into pictures? 2 sisters and 3 brothers were working in pictures, did much synchronizing in French and German, which I wonder if that means she was doing like dub stuff. I don't even know what that means exactly. What would you do if not in pictures? Stage. But these MGM questionnaires had really interesting, all the questions aren't answered. She was a little girl, but favorite menu, spaghetti. Maybe I should have made that. She also loved cottage cheese, which her granddaughter confirmed that they were always eating cottage cheese, which is funny. But they have weird questions like, do you believe in hunches? Do you ever successfully follow a hunch? Favorite vacation, greatest disappointment. I assume they would fill these out, and then, the press agents would go nuts creating these magazine stories. But it was, it was shocking to me to find out how big she was in these Paramount days. Now, I think when she moved to MGM, and everyone else I've talked to in person who, ever worked at MGM, like that was considered, that's the holy grail. So regardless of, the above the title stardom she had at Paramount, I guess it was considered, very much an upward move to go to MGM.
They were like Tiffany's, of the movie studios, basically.
Yeah, totally. And most people who were there say so. And, I've talked to people who were big fans of the studio system, the way they were, educated, everything was taken care of for you. And obviously we know many people who didn't like it. Oh, I wanted to mention this other great movie, because I didn't watch it the other night, but that wonderful documentary about Marsha Hunt, who's still with us at,
yes, I love her.
101 now, or 2, or
103.
103.
Yeah.
God, I love it. She made 2 movies with her, but this one you've got to find. It's an MGM movie called I'll Wait for You. She played Marsha Hunt's sister. And like in many of her films, she was the sister, but she was also trying to matchmake Marsha Hunt, I think, with Robert Sterling, who was like this criminal on the lam who was staying with them. It's a great movie. Here's another one of them chatting. I never had a chance to talk to Marsha Hunt, and I don't know if they mentioned this film in that documentary, but I'd love to hear what she had to say about working.
Probably reach out and get to talk to her.
Yeah, because there's not that many people, around that worked with her.
She and Norman Lloyd are just made of titanium steel. He's 106, she's 103.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. We know Norman Lloyd. He's a friend of my wife's family, and he's incredible. Oh, she was in this wonderful movie with Claudette Colbert and Fred McMurray called Made in Salem, about the Salem witch hunts. And there she is, Benita Granville's her sister. I love this film too. She's just always so great.
She really worked with a who's who in Hollywood back then too.
She did. She did. She and like Cora Sue did in many films, the way they used kids in adult films was in these flashback sequences. So she played Rosalind Russell as a child in one movie, and other people, there was one movie where she played some blonde actresses as a child, so they dyed her hair blonde. And Dickie Moore played the adult lead as a kid, who I think was Gary Cooper. I forgot what that film was. Here she is in Girl of the Ozarks, which she was the star of. Look how little she is. She's the star of this film. And then here, she made 2 films in color. Did you ever see Men with Wings?
I haven't seen that, no.
it's a wonderful film, and she's one of the female lead, who I'm forgetting who played it as an adult, was played by 3 different actors, and she was in the middle section, and that was in color. And then Best Foot Forward was in color. Here you can see her in color with Tommy Dix. This is her last film, where she's, you know, much a young woman. And she was very busy she was at all of Jane Withers' parties. This might be one of them, or this might have been a wartime event, but I found this the other day, and I've had it for years. It's from the Academy Library, but I was shocked to see. Let's see. There's Virginia, and she's standing right next to Cora Sue, who's still with us. And I didn't realize that I did not realize I had a picture of the 2 of them together. Cora Sue has said,
Cora Sue Hollywood Kitchen. That is on my to-do list.
Oh, you got to get her on. And she, of course, knew everyone, including all the people we just mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, there were lots of articles of Virginia having parties for her, as this one says, action, jive, and lots of tasty food as junior hostess Virginia Weidler recipe for a party for the younger set. So she was always entertaining. She was very socially active with the Hollywood community, and they all loved her. So.
Well, should we look on Facebook and see if people are asking questions?
Yes, and do you want me to show you what these cookies look like when they're done? Because they're kind of fun. You can see the crinkle top. It almost looks like it snowed on them.
Yeah, here, I'll show you mine too.
Very good. Yeah, the crinkle, it's a lovely Christmas effect.
Yeah, let's look on Facebook, see if anyone's got questions for us.
All right.
For you. I think I've got a lot of Virginia Weidler movies to catch up on here because I'm learning a lot from you.
I'm going to send you a list too of ones that I've forgotten to mention.
Oh, please do. Because I mean, I don't know everything. I haven't seen everything. I mean, it's not for lack of trying, but you know, there's always more that I can learn.
Some of these are hard to find, but then you'll see one like appear in its entirety on YouTube for free, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
The Great Man Votes is really, it's kind of Barrymore when he was starting to, you know, go a little bit past his prime, but it works well for the role. He plays this it's a fascinating movie for our current times because he's this guy who he's like kind of a drunk, and he has 2 kids and no wife, and it's determined that for whatever reason, like his vote will swing an election one way or the other, so everyone's trying to get his vote. It's just really interesting, all sorts of issues that are of interest today.
Oh, wow. Let's see. You should write, Benjamin says, you should write Virginia's biography, Danny. These stories need to be cherished.
Oh,
I agree.
I would love to do that. And this guy, Pete White, and I in Baltimore have talked about that.
As I was mentioning, it's so hard to get books done because of the commercial aspect of things. But maybe if that was hard to get just a Virginia Weidler book, maybe there's like other child stars you could kind of do a volume of different experiences or stories maybe, or
right. I mean, even some of the ones you work with that maybe aren't the most well known today, but they all had amazing careers, like Gloria Jean, for example, and all the Paramount kids. I mean, they were big deals at the time.
Yeah, and I've always been fascinated by the psychology of child stars and child actors because, you know, to kind of be catered to, paid well, treated like royalty, and then overnight, sometimes in some cases, it would be over. And then they have to kind of move on to teenage and adult life. And in a lot of cases, they're not always fully prepared for that. And it's just a weird kind of set of circumstances to be in that position.
Sure. I will say, though, the best thing about the Weidlers, from everything I've learned, is that they were as grounded can be, eccentric, but very grounded. And there was no way her mother or her 5 brothers and sisters were going to let her. I mean, you know, there's funny stories you read in some of the articles where, you know, she comes home from starring in a movie and they're like, go feed the dog. You know, I mean, it's just like there was none of the star stuff, even though I venture to say she was probably supporting the family for several years at 7, you know, 8, 9, 10. So that I'm sure there's some weirdness that develops from that, but from everything I've heard, they were a really cool family.
because I've read the Baby Peggy biography, and I met Baby Peggy too, and her
Yeah.
story just is gut wrenching. Of course,
Oh.
like, oh.
Yeah, no, I think all of the money she made was kept for her. There was none of that. It's a very positive story in terms of who she was as a person. And then when she left it behind, perfectly happy, normal life. It wasn't like she was needing to be a star at home, au contraire. I'm just thinking of some of the other movies. She played Wallace Beery's daughter in Barnacle Bill, which I was never a huge Wallace Beery fan, but boy, that movie is poignant. That's worth seeing. There's 3 movies they were trying to have another Andy Hardy thing, series going on about this family. The weird thing is that the 2 kids in the family were Anne Rutherford, who obviously, as you know, is in the Andy Hardy movies as his girlfriend. So I thought, isn't that weird that they were trying, it didn't work, but they did make, 2 of them, but by the second one, they had like almost the same cat. Guy Kibbe, how do you pronounce his name? Guy Kibbe was her father, and Anne Rutherford was her sister. And then in the next movie, they had slightly different names. So they just gave up on trying to recreate the Hardy series. But they're fun. I like them. And I love Anne Rutherford. I got to talk to her a few times too.
Do you have your computer handy? Because I've got stuff all over my hands, and now I'm getting it all over my iPhone. So.
Oh, I do. Let's see. I haven't, but I'm on Zoom. So
my iPhone is like caked in dough right now. It's so sad. But
your phone will never be the same again.
Yes, a lot of phone cleaning will take place after this call is over.
Okay, here we go. Paramount Kids would be a great title for a book. I agree.
I agree too.
Yes, Teresa. Hi, Teresa. Virginia Weidler plays Anne Harding in Peter Ibbotson. That's the one that they dyed her hair blonde. Benjamin says, I think dubbing movies started after World War II in Germany. Many classics came later. Oh wait, there's a lot more though I haven't seen. That's weird. I can't. There says there's 58 comments, but I can't get to them.
Yeah, I can't either. And yeah.
That's weird.
Well, we can always answer them just in writing on Facebook afterward too.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure people are going to have a lot of questions for you.
Oh, you know what she's also in that I think she's wonderful in? Remember the famous story of Katharine Hepburn, I think, walking out on her contract because she refused to appear in Mother Carey's Chickens? Mm-hmm. Well, they made that movie, and she's in it, and she's wonderful. I think, Anne Shirley ended up in the Katharine Hepburn part. I don't blame Katharine Hepburn, to be honest, but I really enjoyed that one. Some of my other favorites. Her third film with Mickey Rooney was Young Tom Edison. They showed that recently, and she's very good as his sister, Tanny Edison. Of course, and that was another Norman Taurog movie who loved Virginia. In real life, I think it was his older sister by several years, but she's his much younger sister because they wanted Virginia Weidler to play the part. Oh, and another very A-list movie she made was All This in Heaven Too.
Betty Davis.
Yeah, she's one of, and actually Cora Sue's in that. In the schoolroom scene, and Betty Davis gave her this lovely little gift that she inscribed for her that I saw. But anyway, Virginia was one of the children, one of Charles Boyer and Barbara O'Neill's children. I love that movie. And if you remember Barbara O'Neill, fresh from playing the wonderful Mrs. O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, who's like everyone's dream mother, played the worst mother, the most chilling, scary mother in the history of the movies, Virginia Weidler's mother. And there were 4 kids. June Lockhart, who was also a friend of hers, was one of the daughters, and then Ann Todd. But she really enjoyed doing that. And then she was in one of the Anne Southern Maisie movies. They would plop her in these series films, like in the Hardy movies, called Gold Rush Maisie. I don't think I mentioned when she was in Out West with the Hardys. And remember, Mickey Rooney loved her, but he was so horrified at how she was like stealing the scenes, that she tried to get some of her scenes cut down a little bit. I don't know if he succeeded, but I thought that was funny. He felt a little threatened by this girl who was much younger than him.
Funny. Did she ever keep a diary or any sort of personal recollections of her career?
Not that I've ever seen. I own some stuff that Margaret O'Brien, like her little child books that they'd published. Who knows if she had any part of them? But no, there was a Virginia Weidler paper doll, those paper doll books with different outfits.
Oh yeah.
And that. She was in her heyday. I mean, she was on a lot of stuff, notebook covers and certainly magazine covers and stuff. But it's interesting to me that, thank God for the Philadelphia story, and to a tiny bit lesser, the women, because, that's one thing that I'm really interested in. Maybe that could be the focus of a book, is people who were super well known for a period of time and then just fell off the radar. I mean, there's so many of them. I wouldn't call her off the radar, especially because of those 2 films. But when you see the level of her stardom and acclaim, critical acclaim, it's interesting that, they're not more, but until TCM, I mean, there were years where none of these films were ever seen.
When I was a kid, if you went to the video store, well, first off, you had to watch stuff on TV, and there's no way to record it. If you miss it, you miss it, just commercials. And then when VHS came about, they only had a very limited selection of classic Hollywood titles, and it would usually be Citizen Kane, Gone with the Wind, just the top tier, So if there was anything kind of obscure or out there, it was a lot harder to find before DVD and streaming and Blu-ray and all the stuff that we have now.
Totally. And when I was watching the Andy Hardy movies with my mother, who loved them as a kid, they were on, I remember it was WGN in Chicago, if anyone's watching from Chicago, and they were butchered. I mean, butchered. So when I finally saw them years later, like, oh my God, that's a great scene. I mean, everything was butchered. The Philadelphia story, there were commercials everywhere. And then they would cut it down. Oh, Pamela, hi Pamela, said, I wish they made a Virginia doll such as Shirley and others. I wonder if they did. I have some ads of her, of like Virginia Weidler hats and stuff. I should research that more.
So interesting to me to see how they use the stars in a commercial way to kind of sell products and everything.
And I'm guessing even when their name was on it, I bet in those days, especially kid actors, I doubt they got much remuneration for that. I think it was just part of their contract.
Yeah, I don't think they had agents that would negotiate percentages on all these products and stuff.
Yeah, no way. Oh shoot, I wish I could see these 59 comments.
I'm gonna try again. This phone is already pretty messed up anyway, so whatever. Let's see.
I will mention, just to prepare people, that Babes on Broadway is the one with the infamous minstrel number, unfortunately in blackface, which I'm happy that I saw it recently on TCM, and Ben Mankiewicz, they don't cut it, and I don't think they should, but they explain it and introduce it and warn people, because it is kind of shocking to see your favorite stars in blackface, which was, not uncommon in those movies. Oh, here's a great picture. I love this one because it's at the MGM schoolhouse, and it's Virginia getting weighed, and that's the teacher. I forgot her name now. I've researched her. The famous teacher that, all of them were in class with: Elizabeth Taylor, Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland. Darla Hood is in this picture, which is interesting. Tommy Nunn. And considering the hierarchies back then, I am struck by all the people that I've met that knew her as a kid and loved her, because, I don't think she ever said anything remotely like, I'm bigger than you. And I don't even think she even knew it. I think she was pretty protected. I mean, she was just working. And I just don't think she was that involved in, the star part of that.
That kind of speaks to her mom and her family for kind of ensuring that she didn't let it go to her head.
Which also reminds me of Cora Sue, who's like oblivious about some of the, huge things that were being done around her, because her mother protected her from that and didn't make her some swelled head brat, like some of them became.
definitely. Again, I just think the psychology of the child star is absolutely fascinating topic.
Tricky. I mean, I'm sure it was tricky, but and she did go to the MGM school, and I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know if she ever went to regular school much. I think she went to that professional school early on that a lot
Ballers.
of those kids went to, possibly. And it's interesting because I know how involved she got at her son's school, where her grandchildren went to a school in LA, and I wonder if that was part of it, like just really getting involved with the school and having this normal children.
So her family today, she's got grandkids or?
Yes, well, the two grandkids I know are this wonderful woman, Lindsay, and then her brother Jonathan Crizel is a big time writer producer. He worked on Portlandia, The Kroll Show. Right now, he's writing and directing some movie version of Sesame Street that I think is with the Children's Television Workshop that should be fun, knowing his sensibility of kind of out there humor that I love. I met him because I know Fred Armisen, and so I was at a birthday party for Fred Armisen, who was on Portlandia, and he's the one that introduced me to Lindsay, who's more involved in the legacy of Virginia Weidler and being part of that family, and they still own some property that Virginia lived in. So I have this great picture one year on her birthday. My son and I used to go to her different homes and just take pictures and just think about her. And Lindsay brought us, I have a picture of Virginia in front of this doorway, and then I have a picture of us with her granddaughter. I wish I had that with me. So that was very meaningful. That was, I think, 2 years ago on her birthday. She'd only be 93 today, so it would be lovely to have her around as I'm sure she would have had a wonderful life. It's sad, but she had an amazing career. I would love for her to be more well known than she is. She was in the two big broadcast of 1936 and the one of 1937. Those interesting movies with Burns and Allen, just in like these small scenes where she'd be with the other kids. They'd always drag in the kids to do some fun number. Just so many interesting movies.
Write that book, Danny.
Yeah. What?
Write that book.
Oh, I know. There's really a lot of history. Maybe I need to frame it better. So, but if you can definitely find her last two films that I think are so worth seeing for so many different reasons. In The Youngest Profession, her father is played by Edward Arnold, that wonderful actor, usually very kind of gruff, but and Jean Porter plays her best friend, another child star who I think she just recently died, but she was also contacted by our Virginia Weidler group and had just endless wonderful things to say about Ginny. So, I follow some people that I'm interested in who maybe in real life, it's questionable, but I love their films. But it's always been gratifying to follow someone who's so beloved, even, many years after her death.
Well, we're about at the 1 hour mark. So any final thoughts on Virginia or final things you'd like to say or add? And I'm assuming you'll be happy to answer questions on Facebook if we missed people's questions.
I will go there, and I'll also add any additional movie recommendations. And in some cases, I think The Underpup, which is really worth seeing, is on YouTube. So that you should all watch it tonight. And we usually do some big celebration around her birthday in March, where we put clips and things of her on. If you want to join the Facebook group about her, come on over. And that's it. She's an amazing young star who was just completely natural and a really kind and wonderful person too.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today on Hollywood Kitchen. And I would like to wish everybody out there a happy Hanukkah, a Merry Christmas. And if you make these cookies, tag Danny Miller and Carrie Bible and let us know how they turned out.
You'll love them, I promise.
I do too. They're delicious. And I hope everybody has a happy and safe holiday season.
Bye.
Bye.